Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to be installing our Stage 1 suspension kit, which is on the budget-friendly side of things. It includes some Bilstein 5100s, front and rear, as well as some Freedom Off-Road upper control arms. We're going to be transforming this 4Runner Limited, a tired 4Runner Limited at that, into a more, off-road capable vehicle. So I guess we'll get started. First thing we got to do is with this particular model, it has the X-RIAS system on it, so we're going to have to remove that to install the Bilstein 5100s. Shouldn't be too difficult, but let's get started and get on the way. Okay. So as we've started, we've taken the wheel off. Obviously, that's step number one. It's always a good idea, especially on a tired 4Runner like this one. It has 120-something thousand miles on it. You want to check all of your components. Looks like we should go ahead and replace this end link. Anything that's leaking grease and oil needs to be at least examined to determine if you should replace it now or do it later. But since we're in here, we might as well replace this. This is a cheap little part, maybe 25, 30 bucks. So we'll do that on both sides later. And yeah, just inspect everything that you're not replacing to see if you need to do a little bit more work while you're in here. So to get your sway bar end link off, this is a 17 millimeter nut, but it does have an Allen wrench on this side to hold in. I'm going to try, I don't know what size that Allen wrench that is, but I'm just going to try to ooga-dooga that sucker right off of there. Hopefully we don't need. Ha! Yahtzee. This is what I was talking about earlier. You can see that it's actually ripped. It won't last much longer, and then you'll make all kinds of racket and you won't know what's going on or why. Next, we're going to take off these brake line brackets in preparation of removing the spindle from the control arm. Because the last thing we want to do is stretch our brake lines. This one is a 10 millimeter. The one on the spindle was a 12. Right. There we go. And finally, you want to be aware that this is actually your ABS line. If you stretch this and it pulls the wires too tightly, you will get an error, ABS fault. You'll have to resplice the wires. It turns into a big problem, so be aware of that. So a little trick here, this is actually kind of a tapered fitting from the control arm to the spindle. A few good whacks should do it. There it goes. That's what you also don't want to stretch your line. That's the thing you don't want to do. But I do it for your educational purposes. All right. Obviously it's not good to have this stretch either. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab some wire, a coat hanger, anything you've got to secure this spindle in so that these are still loose. Like I said before, we need to secure this spindle so that we're not stretching our brake lines and our ABS lines. Usually I connect it to the control arm, but since we're taking that off as well as this coil spring, I zip tied it to this bracket itself of the brake line, which is holding it just fine. Getting this control arm off, which seems very straightforward because you got a 19 millimeter bolt right there and nut. You simply loosen that and then you slide this one giant bolt out, completely out the front. But you're going to see later why that becomes an issue. First thing we'll do is first thing we'll do is get some more leverage. There we go. Why are we spinning over there now? You'll notice that the control arm is now loose. That is because when Toyota torques these bolts down, they set the truck at ride height. This is unlike your other aftermarket control arms with the polyurethane bushings that can be tightened while it's not at right height because they move freely on those bushings. The OEM style bushings are kind of they're captured in whatever height you torque them down at. So be sure to remember that whenever you're putting it back together. Otherwise, if you tighten it down like this, and then you're going to be putting extreme stress on those bushings, and it'll cause premature failure. This is the most aggravating and frustrating aspect of changing a control arm out on Toyotas. Honestly, it's a pretty good safety feature, but this is one single bolt. It's more than a foot long, and I believe Toyota does it this way at this angle so that if your nut does come off, you're not going to have a catastrophic failure and lose components. It'll just be loose. It can't come out. So with that being said, it's kind of a pain to get it out. Some people may find that their body is going to stop the bolt head from passing through. If that's the case, we got lucky on this one. I mean, it's literally, it's shaved by it. You're gonna have to pry this back. Some people have even had to cut a little bit away, but it's not gonna cause any kind of problems. So you have to get this bolt by it. And luckily, we don't have to do that today. Just keep working it past. So here's our bolt, and this is the next bracket that's trying to stop it, but I think we can manhandle it. Ah, yes. So now we just keep, just keep working it past, and of course, you know, it wasn't gonna be the easiest, because I believe we're gonna have to remove the whole battery to get that sucker out. No? Yes? Yes! Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Oh. All right, so anyway, here's your bolt. We did get very lucky. We didn't have to take the battery out. I was concerned about that. I've had to do that many times before. But, you know, as all things that are made by different people, things shift around differently and this and that. So I'll take that win today. We are replacing these control arms simply because, like I said, this truck has 120-something thousand miles on it. It's probably a good idea. But you can really determine the life or the health of your control arm ball joint here. You should feel some resistance in here. And this one is, honestly, considering the miles, it's not bad. But you'll know if it's bad. A, if you've got a cracked lip, you've got leaking grease, that's how you know you had a bad ball joint. And so you definitely need to replace those at that point. Now we're removing this lower strut bolt. And then after we do that, we'll remove these 3 top hat bolts, nuts rather. So, once you get these top hat nuts loose, don't think it's just going to be a walk in the park. Because just like I mentioned earlier, these are captured bushings, and they want to stay exactly where they were when they were tightened. So the lower control arm is also got pressure on it right now that is holding everything up. So we're going to have to grab a pry bar, or in extreme situations, the jack in the back of your truck to press this lower control arm back down so we can slide everything out. Before we can take this strut assembly out, we're going to remove our lower strut bolt. If we remove that zip tie we had, and there we go. All right, so when you buy this kit, just be aware that either you or your installer is going to have to reuse the spring and the top hat here. This is the top hat and the rubber bushing there. There we go. It's a good idea to inspect your top hat bushing, this rubber bushing, if you're going to reuse it. Any rips or tears will, you know, eventually cause squeaking and a malfunction in the suspension. So this all looks good to me though, clean, no cuts, no abrasions, no problems. So this is the replacement Bilstein 5100 for the front, and you can see here it's got this little circlip and these valleys where the circlip goes. Right now it's on the stock setting, which means 0 inches of height. You can go up to 1/2 inch, 1.5 inches, or 2 inches. I'm sorry, no, this is like more than 1/2 inch, like 3/4 inch, 1.5 inches, and a little bit over 2 inches of height by setting that circlip where it is. So what's going to happen though is it puts more preload on the spring when you do that, which will make the ride height change depending on where you put this. Just keep that in mind. All right, so now we're ready to reinstall our new Bilstein strut assembly. Be aware if you are doing this yourself that you need to try to line up the top hat with the I guess this bottom bolt hole. It should be parallel to each other. These two bolts go up front. You got the one bolt at the back, and this bolt needs to be obviously the same way as these two bolts. Otherwise, you won't be able to. You'll have one perpendicular, and you won't be able to get anything in there. So, scratching up my Bilstein sticker. Okay. All right. There you go, baby. Okay, so we chose the Freedom Off-Road upper control arm for a few reasons. One, this sucker is incredibly beefy. I mean, I'm not certain what the wall thickness is on this tube, but this thing weighs probably 8 to 10 pounds. So I mean, I wouldn't doubt it's pretty thick. It's also got these nice gussets on the control arm, and it uses a sealed ball joint. And this is what I was saying earlier. Like, I can barely even move this thing. So you can tell how worn out that other control arm really was. Not only is it incredibly beefy, but it's practically the least expensive control arm on the market. And I mean, you're getting a whole heck of a lot of your money's worth here. It uses an OEM style bushing in the control arm. So we will have to set the ride height before we fully torque down that big old long bolt. But I mean, other than that, it's a winner, dude. Yes, man, we really got lucky on this particular truck. Oh no, there we go. Make certain you have your washer closest to the control arm. Otherwise, it'll hung up on everything. Look at that. One thing I didn't touch on yet was the importance of one of these aftermarket off-road control arms. What that allows you to do is get the proper alignment based on the amount of lift, because once you get beyond 2 inches, it wasn't exactly necessary for this particular instance, but I went ahead and replaced it because these other control arms were worn out. But what this will let you do is over 2 inches of lift, it's damn near impossible for any alignment tech to get the proper alignment without one of these control arms, because this control arm gives you like an extra 2 degrees of caster, which pulls the wheel away from the body of the truck and allows for the OEM alignment specs to be adhered to. So you do that bad boy in there and then use the nut that they supplied. All right, so like I said before, I am replacing this in link, but it's being stubborn. So, gotta bring different tools out. What? Here we go. So now that we've got all of our parts and pieces put back together where they should go, don't forget to obviously tighten these down and torque them, and you'll be good to go. Just as a side note, guys, you will need to support the axle on the side that you're working on, because the shock is the limiting factor on the axle dropping down. You can tell as I've been loosening the bolt, it's actually been pulling it down as we went. So be certain to secure the axle there, otherwise you'll have a big surprise once you get that nut off that shock. Quick tech tip, very useful to have a ratcheting wrench. Otherwise you will spend 30 minutes getting this one nut off because there's not much room between the bolt and the body. I'm going to remove this lower 17mm bolt. There she blows. So this is the rear Bilstein. Looks very nice. The boot cover is real nice, but it comes with all kinds of spacers or junk you may not know what to do with. So here's the correct way to install them. This first one is a washer. It's a concave washer. That's going to be pointed down in that way. Next comes this rubber bushing right on top. And then you're presented with this choice of these two alignment spacers or alignment washers. One of them has a hole that's larger than the other. You can see this one's larger than this one. And what you'll need to do is check your shock mount location to determine which actual alignment spacer you need. It looks like this one is the correct one, because if we try this one, you can see there's a whole bunch of slop right there. You don't want that. You don't want that at all. So we're going to use this alignment spacer or washer, and that will go directly under here and slip up under there, and then we do the reverse on the other side. Okay. So now that we've got this sorted out, we're going to go behind the brake line here, insert this into the shock mount. Our rubber bushing goes first. And this is where it gets fun. This washer will go like this. You see how it's concave. We're going to put the concave portion upright. I know it seems counterintuitive, but according to Bilstein, however you want to say it, these washers do not cup upwards, they cup downwards, away from the rubber bushings. So keep that in mind. Yeah, I know this is not the tool you're supposed to use, but I ain't got a size 23.5 slim wrench to fit in there. So what's happening is I'm tightening up this top bolt, the shock is spinning. Luckily, Bilstein put this nice handy dandy little section right there to keep it from spinning. And you may be wondering, well, how tight do I get this thing? And the answer is, you want to see these rubber bushings, you want to see these start to bulge, and we're practically there. They've got just a little bit of bulge on them. We're not looking to go super tight. We're not looking to go super loose. We want to be right in the middle. I think we can go a little bit more. I don't even have any threads past the nut here, so we're going to give it a little bit more and call it a day. And that's it, guys. We've once we button up this bottom bolt, the 17. With that, we can install our wheels and tires, put it back on the ground, and go take it for a test drive. Last but not least, we're going to throw some wheel spacers on this truck to poke these OEM wheels out just a little bit, give it a little more aggressive stance, and help clear these slightly wider tires off of the upper control arm. Now, I know there is some debate online, contentious debate, about whether wheel spacers are safe or how they affect the bearing and all this stuff, but I'm here to tell you that wheel spacers are safe as long as they're installed correctly. All right, you follow the manufacturer's instructions, you put your Loctite on, and you torque them down properly, you won't have a problem. And as far as the bearing goes, the bearing doesn't know any difference between a wheel spacer or a high negative offset wheel. It is the exact same thing. You're putting the exact same kind of load on that wheel bearing. So don't give me no internet engineer armchair crap about how spacers are worse than a negative offset wheel. So like I said, you just need to make certain that we follow the instructions. I'm going to get some Loctite. And you also want to make certain that whatever wheel spacer you do get is hub centric, which means that the size of the hole in the wheel spacer is the exact same size as the hub on your vehicle so that there is no play. Because if it's off a little bit, you'll have vibration issues when you're driving. All right, so like I was saying earlier, we're going to put some blue Loctite, which is the medium Loctite. Do not put red Loctite. You do not want that. You won't get it off unless you heat it up. But the blue Loctite will keep it nice and secure without being a complete pain in the ass to get off if you need to later. So just going to pop that on there. And this is a little mechanics trick here. As we go to torque this down, obviously the wheel's going to want to spin. So we're just going to pop this in to the rotor and let that rest against the caliper. So as we go and torque these up, the wheel cannot turn on us. And just like every wheel that you put on your vehicle, you should go in a crisscross pattern. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Just make certain that it's crisscross so that everything lines up perfectly. So what I'm doing right now is the final step. If you don't do this, you're going to have a bad day. You need to make certain to tighten up your upper control arm nuts at ride height so that you don't put your bushings under stress when you're driving around, because that will lead to ripping and deterioration. You don't want to do that. So ride height's where you want to tighten these. You might have to get a little inventive in order to get it done correctly, because it is a whole lot of torque you need to put on these, but that's what you need to do. And that should finish us out. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And go buy this kit. You're going to love it.